order I call to order the workshop meeting of the Reading Planning Commission for July 18th, 2023. I am William Sinfisi. I'm chairing the meeting in the absence of our chairman, Wayne Beeler. Commissioners Nelson De Leon and James Harris are also present, one via Zoom and one in person. I'm attending telephonically as well. And also here with us our staff. We have Brandy Davis, our city planner, and Jerome Skrinkowski, our planning consultant. Just a note, effectively these workshops are like committee of the whole meetings, and therefore we do not conduct any voting. The purpose here is to accept presentations and to engage in informal discussions on matters that either do not require a vote or that are not ready for a vote yet. Therefore, because we're not conducting any business, a quorum is not necessary. We have 3 members present here out of 6, but as I said, it's not any obstacle for us to conduct this workshop. And of course, as this meeting is being recorded by our city planner, it'll be posted for our colleagues who cannot attend to be able to review it in the meantime, as well, of course, for the members of the governing body, the city council, the mayor, and the general public. With that, we can go. I'm going to switch here to find the agenda. Okay, we can go to the first. Go ahead.
The solicitor has arrived.
Yes, I apologize for being a little late there. I had an issue.
Oh, thank you. That's okay. You only missed the introduction, just right in time. Thank you. Our solicitor, Matt Fessler, is in attendance. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
So we'll proceed then to the first item, which is the Downtown Reading Vision Zero Action Plan, which is a presentation by Simone Collins. And sounds like it's going to be something exciting from what I understand. So I ask the presenter to feel free to begin his presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Appreciate your time this evening. My name is Peter Simone, and I'm with a firm called Simone Collins, and I'm going to take you through a very brief summary of over a year's worth of work and tell you where we are with this planning study. Here's my agenda for tonight. I won't read this, but basically the big pictures, we started with what was called an active transportation plan. And because of some federal legislation, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which has presented some great opportunities for funding for the city, we pivoted into what we're calling a Vision Zero Action Plan. And we're going to tell you about that and why we think it's going to be a good thing for the city. Here's our contact information. These are my colleagues who I'm working with on the plan. And we're, of course, working through Jamal Abdallah's office, and he's assisted by Sarah Hailstone, who's assisting with some of the staffing needs for the city. We've been working over the last year with a very active and very involved committee. I highlighted here the folks who are part of city professional staff. And I have to say, everyone's been very, very involved, and we've got a really great committee with a lot of expertise who has really helped us through this process. The purpose of the plan was to improve conditions for walking and biking in the downtown core area and create suggestions for more equitable and integrated multimodal facilities, specifically walking and biking. And the goals for the city were to assess existing conditions and develop concept level design, graphics, and planning level cost estimates. So we provide the city with a blueprint towards implementation. And many challenges, as you can imagine, with creating these facilities. We want them to be equitable to destinations. And we want to also address community health through active transportation. We have Penn State, a couple of our committee members are from Penn State Health, and they've been instrumental in the great thing. They also have funding available as they go forward, which maybe could be put towards the city. So we started this back over a year ago, working with the original scope. We had a public open house in October. We've looked at priority corridors in the city and have had several meetings with our committee. And our charge was to recommend 6 priority corridors in the city for these improvements as a first step. And you can see the 6 priority corridors here highlighted. They are 2nd and Canal Street in the pink on the left, Court Street and Cherry Street as 2 one-way pairs, Penn Street, of course, which has been the subject for many years of greening efforts and a lot of discussion about redesign of Penn Street. 7th Street, the Railroad Corridor, which is a new focus for possible transit-oriented development zoning and is a focus for hopefully the reinstatement of rail service to Reading, and also the Spruce Street Riverfront Drive corridor in blue. So these were the 6, through a process with our committee, these were the 6 priority corridors we've identified. You can also see some others that I'll talk about in a minute, shown in red. In the improvement toolbox that we have, you can see a variety of things, including sidewalks, of course, which are, sorry for my dog barking in the background there, sidewalks, and things like curb cuts and flashing beacons that can be part of the improvements in the city. So this is just as a way of information of what types of things we might recommend as we go forward with these improvements. If we look at the first corridor, which is 2nd Street corridor to Canal Street, we have all of these streets, as you know, vary in both cross sections and widths and existing facilities, so that not all conditions are the same. So we're going to show you some examples of what could work here along each corridor. Also, I should mention that Tim Kroll, the city engineer, shared with us a parking authority study, which is recent and will help us and coincides with some of the things that we're recommending here along 2nd Street. But down near the theater, we're showing 3 lanes of vehicle traffic, but also then a bike lane on this one-way section of street where there's some restricted parking right now. So that would be a recommendation. There's some space there to create a bike lane going south on 2nd Street. I mentioned the parking authority has some exciting plans for new parking beyond Penn Street, and that will work out very well with some protected bike lanes. I mentioned Court Street and Cherry Street are a pair of one-way pairs. And again, these are relatively low volume, generally narrower streets. And here we're going to be able to do things like a protected bike lane, on, you can see parking and then a buffered bike lane on the right, maintaining that 1 lane of traffic in this section of Court Street. So these are relatively inexpensive improvements that can be done with painting and signage, which are desirable because we're not moving curb lines, we're not reducing traffic. One of the things we really have paid attention to is not reducing the amount of parking available on the streets at all. We know that's very important to the residents and businesses. Also, there are places where we don't have sidewalks. We have sidewalk gaps. You have a pretty good infrastructure of sidewalks, but simple things like adding a sidewalk, moving back by a couple of feet some parking. So at least we get a basic sidewalk in here along this section of the street. Also, we're going to be assessing the condition of sidewalks. Not all your sidewalks are handicap accessible. So on these major corridors, we're also going to look at that very carefully to develop costs for doing that. On our next corridor, Penn Street, that's been the subject, as I mentioned, for many years of some really ambitious redesign efforts. But what we're doing in our plan is focusing on the last 2 blocks towards City Park of Penn Street, where we can do, again, some improvements with paint and signage. Here you can see on the right in the green, which something that would be called a two-way cycle track. So you'd have two directions of bike traffic here with parking that's actually a little bit out from the curb. So that parking where you see P would function to protect the cyclists along the curb line. This is something that recent legislation in the Pennsylvania legislature is, this is now legal in the state of Pennsylvania. Before it wasn't, for reasons I don't understand, but now it's legal on PennDOT Road. So again, with simply shifting some lanes and narrowing a few lanes, we can maintain traffic, maintain parking, and create bicycle facilities. On Cherry Street, one of our one-way pairs, again, very different widths here. And here we're showing again a buffered bike lane. When this finally goes to design engineering, there's a chance we would shift this bike lane to the curb line here on the right, bring the parking out where you see the green with the arrow, the light green, so you'd have a protected cycle track here on this one-way directional street. And then this is just a photo sim showing you how that might look on this section of Cherry Street. The 7th Street corridor is an exciting old street where the train tracks run. Of course, Norfolk Southern is shown in red, and reason we put it in red, we don't want to mess with their right of way at all, because that just leads to difficulties in terms of getting things done. So the concept here is on the left here, a multi-purpose path 10 feet wide. We have the room, we can have a multi-purpose bike path, and on the right, a pedestrian way. So again, the before and then the after. Again, these are relatively easy to do improvements. And the two areas that the city's looking at for the future train station is on the right there, where the existing bus station is. Maybe in the interim, it could be just a small lawn area, a small park. And then the other possible location for the train station, hopefully, is on the north side of Penn Street. So those are the two locations, to our understanding, that the city's going to examine for the new train station if rail service is restored for passengers. Another priority corridor is Spruce Street, and our recommendation here is to make Spruce Street one-way east to calm traffic, to make the road safer, and also to be able to create a cycle facility on Spruce Street that connects to the 7th Street corridor and then across into Riverfront Park along the river. So how this would look is we would have a buffered bike lane, you can see with the light green on the right, and then what's called the Sharrow, and you've seen these little symbols, which just means it alerts motorists that there might be a bicycle on that road. So it'd have a one-way protected bike lane, and then going eastbound with the direction of traffic would have the Sharrow. So again, how this might look, before and after, is there's before and there's the after. So we did have a meeting last week, which I'll mention in a minute. Certainly residents, this was new information that we shared with some of the residents in this neighborhood. They have some concerns, which are normal. But again, hopefully this can move forward into improvements. The other thing that's really important are these little connectors, and we show 6th Street to 10th Street that would connect Court and Cherry and also Penn, which would benefit from some improvements. But probably the most important thing here is the Bingham Street Bridge. You may recall when the 422 interchange project was going on in earnest, still is, there was going to be a full bike facility on the Bingham Street Bridge. Then the Rack Bridge, which is located up near the word riverfront that you can see, came back online, that's going to be adaptively reused. So for whatever reason, PennDOT thought, well, we don't need to put a full bike facility on the Bingham Street Bridge. We wrote a memo several months ago to the city, which we've resent just last week, that we think it's very, very important that full bike facilities, meaning a 10-foot minimum width bike facility going two ways, is maintained on the bridge, because connections to the swimming pool over at the park, connections to a college campus, and just connections to the 18th Ward here are very, very important, we feel, for not only cars, but for bicycles and pedestrians. So that's in design right now, and now's the time for hopefully both the Planning Commission, City Council, and the Mayor's office to make that recommendation to PennDOT so that doesn't get lost and we get too far down the road with design. Then I mentioned while we were doing the study, the bipartisan infrastructure bill was passed and there's a lot of money available. And what that is, it's one program is called Safe Streets and Roads for All, SS4A. And there's $5 billion over 5 years. This is the second year of the program. And we believe that the city can apply next year in 2024 once our plan is done, which will help you qualify for the funding. And we would submit, we're suggesting an implementation grant that we would submit about this time next year for several $1 million. It's an 80-20 program. It would have to be matched, but we think there are some good matches out there. I won't get into that tonight, but we think this is a very viable program. And the components of an action plan, there's leadership and commitment from commissions like yours and the City Council. There's a safety analysis that we're engaged in right now, looking at how many fatalities and serious accidents happen in the downtown, because the goal of this project is to eliminate fatalities and eliminate serious injuries. And there's a whole number of things that are listed here, which I won't read, that are important to a Vision Zero action plan. We've already started to map, and this is a heat map of areas in the downtown where there are accidents, and we're compiling data from the police department. And Vision Zero, as I mentioned, is a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities. It originated in Europe, and scores of communities across the country are now adopting this. Similar, City of Reading adopted a complete streets policy back in 2015. This is sort of another component that takes it further, saying that we can eliminate these accidents and deaths through policy, through planning and design. So it's an ambitious program, but one we think matters. You're familiar with the complete streets. As I mentioned, the city adopted that back in 2015. And as the words say, it's an approach where your streets should be designed for all modes and all types of users, so that access is equitable and safe throughout the city. And I mentioned the pledge. This is very important because part of this program is for city leaders, elected officials, to pledge to move towards Vision Zero. And we think there are a number of partners, and I have some of them listed here, that will be interested in being part of this effort. It's not a static document. Part of the requirement is that each year the city would evaluate progress. We look at accident data, see how we're doing, what facilities have been put in place, and hopefully we would see after a period of time that fatalities and serious accidents have been reduced. And that's, again, the goal of the process and the project. There are federal guidelines that we have to follow in doing this. And that's some of the work that we're going to be finishing up in the next couple of months, and then coming back to the Planning Commission later in the year. We're doing additional public participation. Last week, we had a meeting through the Legacy Cities Project with the Puerto Rican Civic Society about specifically the Spruce Street corridor that I mentioned earlier. And we want to come back to the Planning Commission a little bit later in the fall. We want to go to City Council a few times, and we're continuing to meet with our committee. When we come back to the Planning Commission, we hope you'll be in a position, and we'll be in a position to get a recommendation from the Planning Commission to move forward with this as a recommendation to City Council as the city hopefully gets ready to apply next year for funding. We also look at equity. And people, not everyone obviously has the physical ability to drive a car, nor do they have the income to drive a car. So we see equity for pedestrians and for cyclists. Very, very important. And all of our cities, including Reading. And so part of what we're going to be analyzing is census data for age, income, disabilities. And this is something that the feds look at when they evaluate these grant applications. And I think because of the urban nature of Reading, income levels, the city's going to score very well. And I think, again, I mentioned these improvements are relatively speaking low cost. We're not moving very many curbs. We're trying to do a lot of this with paint and lining and maybe some curb bump outs, things like that. And then this Vision Zero would carry over to all your ordinances in terms of making sure that this policy carries through as you look at planning in the years ahead in the city. And again, this is a thing that would be monitored each year to see how the city's doing. So this is our remaining schedule, picking up from when we started again in May after a short pause. We would like, this is our first meeting with the Planning Commission. We'd like to come back to you in September with our draft plan. We want to go to City Council also in September and then in November, hopefully for approval of the plan move this forward so that the city would be in a position to apply for funding. I did mention that the minimum request from the Safe Streets and Roads for All funding program is $2.5 million. The maximum is 25. I think we're developing costs right now, but my guess is a request from the city could be in the $4 to $5 million range for the things that we showed you on those priority routes, and we think that would be a big step forward, because right now you have hardly any bike facilities and also improving sidewalks, which is going to be very important. So that's a really quick summary of what we've been doing over the past year. It's great that this presentation is recorded so you can go back and maybe look at some of this in more detail. Also, I can get, if you want our contact information, Brandy has it, or I can put that slide up again. So with that, I'll pause and see if those of you in attendance tonight have any questions or suggestions or things that I may have not been clear about.
Well, thank you, Mr. Simone, for that presentation. Yes, for those of us who cannot see what's being presented this evening, and also for those who are not attending, if you would kindly send those slides over to our city planner, so she could distribute it to us to make it convenient, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a comments and questions, but let me first ask our city staff and planning consultant if they have any comments or suggestions or questions.
Okay, this is Jerome Skrinkowski, the city planning consultant. We have reviewed the purpose, goals, and challenges, and it's a good effort, and it's a good understanding of the city. As you may know, we have a lot of open plans, and some of those plans that were prepared in the past were not implementable for a number of reasons because of vagueness. So as we move forward with this plan, we would hopefully have that the recommendations are specific and implementable, and also the implementation efforts should be achievable. And it sounds like you were working towards that effort with evaluating how to finance the plan. So that's a good effort, and that's vital. Brandy, do you have anything?
I don't at this time. Thank you, Jerome.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask my fellow commissioners if they have any questions or comments. Anybody?
I don't have anything.
Okay, thank you. If you think of anything, just let me know while I mention a few things. First of all, this fits right in with the goals of the Reading Planning Commission, one of which is to promote walkability. There has been in the last several years an increase across America of pedestrian fatalities. So this is certainly an issue of concern. We also promote biking, and parking and traffic are also areas of our concern. I think in particular that idea of having the connectors is really important. I was thinking about that as you were going along with the presentation, because we have at times had proposals for bike lanes put in, but they were disjointed. It's like, what good is it to have a block or two of a bike lane if it doesn't connect to or from anything? We currently have, the only one I know of is Kenhorst Boulevard in the 18th Ward, and I know there are plans in the 18th Ward to expand the bike network. And so I think those are important. And the question I have, and maybe I missed this, because some of the areas that you're prioritizing are close to them, is the plan for these bike lanes to connect with some of our network of trails?
Yeah, good question, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, you can see on this graphic that I have up, the Schuylkill River Trail, which is shown in green along the river. And so both, Penn Street, if you remember the sign on the bridge right now, it says no bike facilities or no bikes on the bridge. And PennDOT put that up because it doesn't, that wide sidewalk doesn't connect anything. So by some of these improvements, hopefully that will be solved. And that's one of the reasons for the Spruce Street connector, and also the 2nd Street and Canal connector. I don't know if members of the Planning Commission have seen the Parking Authority's plans for additional parking on the part of 2nd Street south of Penn. But that street, if you recall, is very, very wide. And they actually are recommending a two-way bike lane on the west side of 2nd Street below Penn, with parking out from the curb, so you have a protected bike lane. And that really jives beautifully with the concepts we have. So, I think the Parking Authority is helping to advance this plan. And also to Jerome's comments and to yours, Mr. Chairman, about having this connect to something. When we'll be getting back to you with a draft plan, we're going to have cost estimates very soon. And because a lot of this work can be done with signage and paint, and we're not moving lots of curbs, we think we could do, if not all of this network that we're showing here, a good part of it, so that you'd have things connected to each other as a starting point after these improvements are made.
Well, thank you. And that brings to mind something. We also have signage on our Penn Square, our main intersection, that bikes are not permitted. And the cartway is narrow there. The sidewalk is very broad. And especially when it's not during regular business hours, it's sort of inviting for people to ride their bikes there. And I can understand that. Right. I'll just take advantage of this opportunity with the soapbox to encourage the plans that have been, debated and discussed and thought about in the city for a redesign of Penn Square that would certainly accommodate bicycle riding. And that takes me to another thing. You mentioned these buffered lanes between, let's say, parallel to the curb, buffered by the parking. And I'm presuming, I can't see, of course, but I'm presuming there's some line where the cars have to park or something that they would know clearly where to park. Everybody would know.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I've seen that in some other city. I just cannot remember where. And it always seemed to me to be more, more prudent, safer. So what brings to my mind, I've asked this before when we've had discussions about bike lanes. What about, first of all, let me ask about the motorized vehicles. Like we have e-bikes that have become available in neighboring municipalities. I guess that would be accommodated in this. And
yes, sir. E-bikes typically are accommodated on these types of facilities.
Right. And then what about, this is more of a policy question, I think, for us all to think about, is would these lanes then be conducive that are buffered for non-motorized vehicles? And I'm thinking skateboards and scooters that are not motorized, etc.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, scooters have proliferated, and again, it's going to depend on the how safe the user feels on these
Mhm.
facilities. So it will vary, but I think, especially like Cherry and Court, or as I mentioned, most times of the day they're low volume, low traffic, and that's why we use them as one-way pairs. But certainly the buffered bike lane with parking protecting it, I think most folks would feel very safe. I should just mention too, these facilities are not meant for child cyclists necessarily. I mean, some more confident young people will use them, but this is more of a transportation system than a recreational system, although it can be used for both.
Well, thank you. I mean, this is the question that cities in America and in Western Europe at least have been grappling with. The subject has come up about some of these motorized vehicles like motorized scooters, and I'm not sure where hoverboards fall into that. If they're still used nowadays, it was a trend for a while, but all those could be figured out. And if we have something that accommodates them so they're not on the sidewalks, I'm even thinking about roller skaters.
Mm-hmm.
If they're on sidewalks and they have a safe place, and this promotes, non-motorized traffic, it's probably a good thing as long as it's, done in a safe way. So thank you, and
Sure.
we'll think about this until September. If there's any other ideas or questions, then we'll see what our colleagues think once they've had an opportunity to review it. And does anybody have anything else before we let our presenter go? Okay, if not, well, we thank you. I'm sorry,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
I just had
Thank
one
you,
question.
and we'll see you in September.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, and that takes us to our next presentation, which is the 12th Street Traffic Plan. And then I'm not sure who is the presenter.
It's Brad King with All Right
Oh,
College.
I was wondering if you were doing the whole thing or just joining in. So this is Brad King from Albright. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And we'll open it up to you for this presentation. I think I know what this is about, but the details is what we'll be interested to hear you present. Thank you.
Thank you, committee members, and Brandy, thank you for putting this up. What we're showing at this point is what we feel is the final plan to present to the PC committee members. And we feel like we've captured everybody's comments. And the only thing that's changed on this drawing a little bit, we went back and looked at the handicap parking, and we moved that handicap parking to be further towards the Shirk Stadium field house. And there's an existing ADA ramp that we cut into that. And so we moved the ADA parking there so that it makes sense to us that it's already in place and that parking as a part of the angle parking would be there. And so from there, I know Jerome gave comments, Tim Crawl gave comments. I feel that we have captured those comments, but that's the reason why we're here tonight. And, from this point, I'm not sure that there's anything else I know to be able to present to you guys or any comments. I know that we sent it off to Jerome, Tim, Public Works. I'm sure that I haven't received any comments back from Fire and Rescue, the police department. I haven't received anything back from that, but this is what we wanted to present and for you guys review and discussion and see if we're missing anything. So with that, I'll open it up to the committee members.
Well, thank you, Mr. King. Sorry?
Yeah, first of all, this is going to
Yeah,
be.
go ahead, John. I was going to ask the staff next. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands that this is going to be a change in traffic pattern from a two-way street
right.
to a one-way street. And
Okay.
the one-way portion is going to be going north from Richmond to Byrne through what's the last street?
Well, it will be, there's no changes to North 12th Street from Richmond to Byrne intersection. And so if we're heading south back towards the city, from Byrne intersection to Exeter, that will become strictly one-way heading south. And that's currently what is on from Exeter Street on 12th Street. That is already one way.
Okay, yeah, that's correct. So as everyone is aware, we had we had a significant project, which was Exeter Hall. And Exeter Hall is depicted on the plan with its parking plan. And as a result of the stadium, which is right next to it, the one-way traffic pattern does make sense. It will provide a significant amount of parking along that segment, which is good. And we also asked as part of this project to make sure all the turning movements can be made, provisions for handicap spaces, the provisions for crosswalks, and all that information. There's going to be signage changes, as well as other requirements. So this is going to be finalized and brought to the Planning Commission for a final recommendation. But from what we gathered from Public Works, as well as the staff, we think this is headed in the right direction. It's our understanding also that the folks from Albright College have had meetings with the local businesses in this stretch. And previously, when I say previously, as part of the Exeter Hall plan, had neighborhood meetings.
That is correct, Jerome. Appreciate that comment. We did meet with the business owners, as you indicate, also the College Heights. They're in agreement and approval. The other thing, while Brandy has this shown right now, we have asked for no truck parking on the camp building side. It's already there on the business side. It's already there. So we're not changing the signage. We're not changing the parking on our neighbor's side. And we're not changing the parking on our side, just that we are posting signage for no truck parking on our side. Thank you, Jerome.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay, Brandy, do you have anything? Hello?
Randy, are you on mute?
Okay, that's unusual. Well, we'll go on in the meantime. Do any of the commissioners have any questions or comments? Okay, I'm trying to remember. I know this plan had come up, but I don't remember when it was presented to us like this, or is this the first time we're seeing it?
That we probably saw it in a previous conceptual plan view with other proposals that Albright had provided. So it was part of a larger document.
Right.
This is just one of them.
And
Right. I know we focused on this, and I'm trying to. I'm not looking at a map at the same time here. So I was thinking about those businesses. So I'm glad they were being accommodated. So if I'm understanding correctly, southbound from Richmond to Byrne will continue to be two-way, north and southbound there, right?
that is correct.
And so my question is, I'm trying to picture this is, so when, say, a vehicle is traveling southbound, then there'll be a do not enter sign, I guess, at the, when it gets to that last block there before Exeter. What is that, 1700 block, what that would be?
That's
And
correct.
then, right, and then, so a person could turn, I'm trying to think, left or right bound there, left or right, you know, east or west, right, to go somewhere else at that point, right?
So at Byrne Street, there will be a three-way intersection so that you can turn right or left or go straight. And then as you head south on 12th Street and you get to the intersection of Exeter, There's a stop sign there, and yes, you can turn either left or right on
Right.
Exeter.
That's what
Or
I'm
go
thinking.
straight.
Right. Okay, I'm trying to picture this, and, you know, it's not, and like I said before, this is not a heavily traversed area, but there are those businesses there, and I'm sure Albright and its, you know, staff is good as to use it, and it's always, I always think it's good if we can maintain thoroughfares. But of course, balancing that with our need for parking is prudent also. And I know we had reviewed the sort of master plan that Albright had presented on the parking, so this may have been an aspect of that.
Yes,
Do
And-
recall that.
it was.
Mhm.
And we
Yeah, go
will
ahead.
be, as a part of our ongoing, including kind of our overall master plan with some of these streets, we will update our master parking plan to include this. This in previous concepts, this type of parking had even more parking because we were looking at making from Burn Street to Richmond Street that one way as well and add additional parking. But as we were in our discussions with our neighbors, they're concerned, and we agreed with
Mhm.
the ability to have two-way traffic with tractor
Right.
trailers that would really potentially hinder that. So the circulation. So collectively working together, we came up with this solution, which I feel is in the best interest of all parties. And we're in totally agreement with that. And we're very happy and appreciative that our neighbors worked with us on this.
Yeah, I think that was the right approach. And you mentioned College Heights. Did you mean the College Heights Community Council, the local community organization?
Yes, that is correct.
You discussed it with them. That's great. So, I mean, I live in that district, so that was prudent also. And yeah, like I said, the business concern there, the circulation, and there is a lot of tractor trailer traffic in that area. So I think that was the right approach, and I don't have any other concerns. Is there anything anybody else has to add?
Yeah, Brad, this is Jerome again. Double check the Exeter Hall plan to make sure that Greg Boggio is using the right plan on this. It looks like we might, for some reason, if Brandy can scroll down a little bit, we modified the access point a little bit. So this might have been a rendition of one of the preliminary or final plans that we had, but yeah, let's just double check to make sure.
You know, Jerome, I think where it is shown, I agree with you. And I think what I got to look at and see, but I think the access coming onto Burn Street, we'll have to look, and if that's what you're talking about, that access point there.
And I think we also added one along 12th as well. Coming back out, it kind of looped around. We'll double check that.
Right, I will do that. I'm my mistake. The access that is shown there on 12th Street in front of the stadium field house, is that the one you're referring to?
I know there's one there, and then I thought there was a second one.
It is. It's down at Exeter Street.
Okay,
But
Okay.
I will double check that to make sure that we are using the current record plan for the Exeter Hall project.
yeah, because this plan predated, well, the 12th Street plan has predated the Exeter Hall plan.
So I will make sure and ensure that the plans are coordinated.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And I want to thank you, Mr. King and Albright College, for all of this communication and outreach and presenting to us, and all this. This has been very helpful to understand things, especially as I've noted before. You know, Albright is a significant landowner and it has a lot of parcels that are connected and some that I think are not contiguous. And so the interplay with traffic and parking and everything is definitely something of interest to us on the Planning Commission. It helps to understand the picture. Is there anything else you wanted to update us on any of the other projects while you're here?
Not at this point. We are, again, fundraising hard on the library project. We're very excited
Mhm.
about that project. We did a 3D graphic fly through that we're putting a voiceover right now, which I think when we complete that, which should be shortly, that I want to share that with everybody on the committee, please. And I think you're going to be extremely impressed and excited and thrilled about what the vision is for this library and how we have incorporated really to connect this with our innovative corridor that Jackie and Adele Shade and myself and Jeff Strader, Rick O'Leary, we've all been working on this to promote this. And the pieces of this puzzle is really starting to come together. And I just want to really take that marketing tool to be able to show everybody what this can be. And I'm extremely excited about that. We are talking and progressing with Nerd Street as far as the esports lab. And then there's also the camp building. We've been talking with people from Harrisburg about our economic development that is out there and how to pursue and track down grant monies, Fed monies. So there's a lot of activity that's going on right now. You know, even though the students aren't there, it is like overdrive for us right now. So we appreciate everybody and the commissioners, everybody in attendance here, helping us with this, guiding us. And we really do want to be good neighbors to everybody. And if you guys ever have a question, you can always reach out to myself or Rick O'Leary, Jerome, Brandy, you know, Wayne, everybody. We're here, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you got a question.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you. Thank you. We do appreciate that thoughtful approach. Okay, if there isn't anything else, we'll move on to the next presentation. This is actually a multi-part presentation, which is the zoning and Saldo subdivision and land development ordinance amendments, phase 1 and 2 update. And I'll turn this over to our city staff and planning consultant, whoever wants to take the lead on this presentation.
We'll both take it, but and Brandy can probably fill you in on the phase 1 effort first.
Yeah, for phase 1, it's been through legal, and they had just very minimal comments. They wanted us to add some whereas summary statements at the beginning of both of them to serve as a, just a description of the changes in the ordinances, in the amendments. So those have been forwarded to planning solicitor to add that language in, and then it won't have to go back through any approval. So then we can go ahead and schedule a time for council after that. So we're almost ready to get those in front of council.
Okay. So now moving on to the phase 2 amendments. The phase 2 amendments, we decided we would focus on some bigger issues that have been on our agenda for some time. And when I say for some time, maybe as 2 to 5 years. The first amendment is going to be relevant to adaptive reuse. And as you may recall, over the past 2 to 4 years, we've had several applications that have come before us considering adaptive reuse. Some projects were denied because they could not meet the parameters, and the zoning hearing board determined that zoning variance would not be prudent. However, what we did was we analyzed some of those applications and determined that it would be best for everyone if we could incorporate adaptive reuse and revitalization efforts in all zoning districts. So the draft does incorporate that to some degree. The R1A and R1 and R2 district, the parameters are much different than, say, the CR, CN, and CH district. So we made sure that we could provide for revitalization efforts, redevelopment, repurposing throughout the city. We feel that these regulations are fair and reasonable and can be implemented through either a zoning permit or as part of a land development plan. The second set of amendments is a comprehensive revision to Part 16, off-street parking and loading. These comments have been building for a long period of time, And this probably was the longest effort. So this is a complete rewrite of Part 16. And I'll just go through the chapter headings. The general application criteria, the design construction standards. In the past, the design and construction standards were applied in various sections. This consolidates all those requirements into one area. We also have the 1603 is the off-street parking standards. The zoning staff has a challenging time with trying to review applications because not all of the uses within the zoning ordinance are recognized in the parking section. So I'm working with and myself are working with Brandy and the zoning office in order to make sure that we have all uses identified. This document probably is, I would say, 80% accurate at this point. So it's our objective to make sure that we identify all the uses that are permitted within the city of Reading and have a provision for off-street parking. The next section and also within the off-street parking section, we did provide for, we had a brief segment within the Part 16 for parking space reductions. We've now provided a more comprehensive evaluation, and this is something that is new within the zoning ordinance. So it does provide qualifiers for off-street parking credits. And this is still a work in progress that we're reviewing with the zoning office, and to make sure that applications can be, we want to make sure that just because they can achieve a 50% reduction, we still want to make sure that everything can still work within all neighborhoods. 1604 is off-street loading standards, and we just modernized these requirements to reflect current trends and application procedures. I don't think we want to have deterrents for growth and development for commercial and industrial applications. So this is probably going to help them out somewhat. 1605 is emergency management and response standards. This is something that's new, and we will have to coordinate our efforts, of course, with the Public Works Department as well as emergency management. 1606 is common or shared parking areas. We had a brief section that was applied for this subject. These have been modified and expanded to provide more opportunities for common parking areas within the city of Reading. 1607, we're not clear, but I do not believe we have drive-through service provisions. And if so, this will be new, and it may have been referenced in Part 15, but there are no detailed standards. So this would be an appropriate place. This would be a more appropriate place for these provisions. 1608 is the electric vehicle charging station requirements. We tried to keep this brief because we want to encourage this use and activity within the city of Reading. In discussing it with the Berks County Planning Commission, there are no other municipalities within Berks County that currently have these regulations. So this is a first step in making sure we've checked nationally, and we felt that it may have been over-regulated, and I don't think the city of Reading wants to over-regulate this use, but we want to make sure that the EV spaces are not going to overtake all of the parking spaces. So it's providing a balance. 1609 is non-motorized vehicles. We thought that this was a new regulation. However, the city of Reading does have provisions for this use, as well as, and I apologize, I might be referring to a different section, but we just want to make sure that we don't have any conflicts with other sections of the ordinance or code. 1610 is public or private parking garages. Again, we did not find anything in the code that would provide any type of regulations. So this is a first stab at it, and this is something that the Reading Parking Authority may want to take a closer look at to make sure that this is fair and reasonable. We've developed this, my office has developed this for other municipalities and have not found any problems with it, but we want to make sure this works for the city of Reading and in an urban environment. 1611 is recreation vehicles, and this is the section I was thinking about earlier. The city of Reading does have some standards for recreation vehicles in place, and we're going to go through that and make sure we do not have any conflicting regulations. And if everything within the current code is acceptable, this section may be taken out. Finally, the last section is prohibited uses and miscellaneous requirements. This is also possibly a work in progress that we want to make sure we capture all prohibited uses and miscellaneous requirements. There are going to be some definitions that we're going to have to add as a result of this effort. So that will be done in the next draft. So where we stand at is that we are currently reviewing this with staff, Public Works Department, emergency services, and all other departments that would have a hand in this to make sure that we have everything covered. We expect to come back with a final draft within the next 2 months and hopefully present a finalized version that can be reviewed by the Berks County Planning Commission, as well as the City of Reading Planning Commission for a recommendation and brought to City Council, hopefully by the end of the year.
Well, thank you, Brady and Jerome, for the presentation. So I understand. Let me take these one at a time. So if I understand, the phase one, are those the ones that we had already reviewed?
Yes, those have already been reviewed and by, yes.
So we're keeping track. Okay, does anybody have anything on the phase one, if we remember what they are?
There was a lot of
everyone understands. Go ahead.
there was a lot of amendments with. I mean, there was probably at least 10.
Yes, I was going to say we have been, with the help of the expertise of our staff, over the last couple of years now, and the work had gone on for years before that, leading up to it, really undertaking a comprehensive review of our subdevelopment and land development ordinance, as well as looking at zoning, which we have to give recommendations for, and it fits together, and really to fill in some gaps, clarify some things, streamline some matters, and it really makes sense, and it makes sense to look at best practices elsewhere, and if we don't find any, to make our own. So it's a very important undertaking, especially, of course, this adaptive reuse is under our purview. And I have a few questions or comments. Before I go into that, I'll ask if our colleagues have anything. First, on the adaptive reuse section. If they've had a chance to review everything. If not, take a look through everything and think about if they think there's anything missing or unclear. Okay, the first question I have is section 1202A. The section 1 it references non-conforming uses for the residential zoned areas, but it doesn't, in section 2 to 5 does not mention non-conforming. And I understand that you mentioned, Jerome, there's a difference between the residential and the other, commercial and industrial. Is that why there's no mentioning of the non-conforming uses in the other zones there?
Yes, and but you know what, that is a good point, and that's something that we can add for discussion purposes.
Okay, I was wondering. I haven't thought it through yet. I just wanted to make sure if that was by design, was simply missed. So,
yeah, we didn't want to over promote it within the residential districts because their residential districts are there for a purpose. provide for residential uses.
Okay, so you'll make a note of that. We'll see about that. On section 5, I have to say, I was really surprised that, are we sure we want to, and I know this is all through special exception to the zoning ordinance. It's not just automatic by right. Are we sure we want to encourage residential units in industrial and heavy mechanical zones? I mean, I thought the point of zoning is to separate these areas. I mean, think of the noises and smells and the truck traffic, et cetera. Is this something that would be carefully considered? Is this what other municipalities are doing? Or, I don't know, I just was really surprised to see that. What can you tell us about that idea?
This proposal was this section of the ordinance in 5, which is a maximum 30% of the cumulative area. I'm sorry, this is for the MC and HM district. Is that correct, Will?
Right.
Okay.
Yes,
So
I saw that. A maximum 30%. And just so everybody knows, we're talking, what is that? Manufacturing, commercial, and heavy mechanical. Do I have that right? Yeah.
Yes. So
Okay.
the reason why the residential option was allowed in there for a certain amount of use or of use of the building was because we've had at least 2 applications come through on the one-stop meetings where they've asked if they can do this.
I see.
So it is a good way to see if we can do this, but if we disagree with this as a whole and say this isn't going to work for the city of Reading and we should focus exclusively on commercial and industrial and have it redeveloped with commercial and industrial, then we should state that. But this is providing.
Well, I mean, that's helpful to understand. Okay, so that gets into technical question. Okay, so in the city of Reading, like every place else, before there was the zoning ordinance, there were factories all over the city, right next to densely packed residential areas. In fact, oftentimes the residential areas were company housing even, or there was, where the workers could walk to work from. But over time, these things became to be more separated for the reasons I described, and that's where zoning was one of the purposes of zoning. But I understand we do have, the point here is to allow for adaptive reuse when it makes sense. And so many of these industrial sites, even if they're still standing, have been reused, adapted, and adapted and reused for other purposes. But the question here is, what about and I'm saying that when they are in residential or commercial areas. But this is different, if I'm understanding. This is in an area that is an industrial zone. Okay, so the question is, for those of us that are not as familiar with zoning, so it wouldn't be by right, and it's limited, as you said, only up to 30%, but it would be allowed by special exception. How does special exception, maybe our solicitor could explain, differ from a variance? And obviously, how does that differ from a by right use? Just so we understand what the process is that's being recommended here for any applicant. It's not automatic, obviously, but it's special provision, the process they would have to go through to apply for this. If someone would explain that, please.
Yes, a special exception is a use by right. It's still a use by right, though, with certain steps. So it allows the reviewing body to attach conditions, which the purpose of the conditions are to ensure that the use would fit into the area. So even though they have the right to use it, the governing body can take a look and limit how it's used to make sure it's not going to impact any of the surrounding areas. Or that's really kind of what those conditions are.
Okay, so for a special exception, the applicant has to go before the zoning hearing board, like
Yes.
with a variance?
Yes, that would be the same procedure. And just to add on, as part of the special exception, they're going to have to prove that it's not going to be detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare of the community.
Okay.
And also, they're going to have to focus on neighborhood compatibility. And if they can accomplish those main objectives, then they could then focus on other questions that are going to come in. The special exception is allowing the public in to either object to the project or support the project. It is different than a zoning variance. A zoning variance would be something that they cannot comply with the zoning requirements, and they would have to prove a hardship.
So this is what I'm getting at, just from my basic understanding. So it's a lower standard than a variance, but in other words, it's expressly allowed because we're putting an express provision for it in the ordinance. If this were to be approved by council, that and adopted, it would be, so it would be by right, but they have to go through this process nonetheless and satisfy all the criteria. And when you mention the public, what you mean there is that, as with the variance hearing, for a special exception, the public is notified, meaning the neighbors within a certain radius, I think it's under the ordinance what that is, and they're invited to attend, and other people can attend and comment. In fact, we can attend, even planning commission members, and give our comments and thoughts. And then you mentioned our solicitor, the governing body. So does that mean that, how does that work in the process? Is that after somebody would appeal the zoning, or during the hearing phase, somebody from the governing body could ask for certain restrictions? How does that play out?
I apologize. I was getting this confused with a conditional use for part of my answer there. And
Conditional use, okay.
I apologize for that. So yes, this is before the zoning hearing.
Interesting.
I apologize. They all get mixed up sometimes. But yes, to go back on my answer, it's what Jermaine said is correct, that they have to prove that the use would fit the area. So if this would be before the zoning hearing board,
Okay.
I'm not sure.
But it's more than just the standard of the zoning administrator's review. It goes to the zoning hearing board. Okay, so how does the governing body participate?
I was thinking of conditional use, which would be the governing
Oh,
body.
that was that part. Okay. But of course, as like I said, with members of the Public Planning Commission, members of the city council or the mayor or the manager can attend, and I'm sure they often do this, attend a zoning hearing and give their opinion and input on any application, right?
Yes, they could.
Right. Okay, so we understand then, because so it's a higher standard than just by right, so that they would have to prove all these criteria, just so we understand the process of what's being proposed here. Because like I said, this is a major change from our longstanding policy, but it's being done here in a limited way and with these fail-safes and protections and that. So just so we understand what we're considering here. So we'll think about that. If anybody has any thoughts on that as we go along, feel free to jump in, and let me go on to the next one.
Hey, Will, I just want to bring up one thing just for everyone's consideration. As part of the previous ordinance did provide adaptive reuse by special exception. So that's why we kept it consistent with that process. What we found was that a lot of adaptive reuse applications, because they were unique and that didn't necessarily fit the design criteria that are in place, required zoning variances. So this way they can make an application for a variance and a special exception, and the zoning hearing board consider both.
Okay. Yeah, obviously, if they need a variance for some other reasons, they would still have to go through that process. It's only for the use we're talking about here would be the special exception process. Okay, if everybody understands that. Okay. If there isn't anything else, just one minor edit. I didn't see anything, by the way, in any of these about, grammar, punctuation, very little. Let me put it that way. So I'm just focusing on content, but this one I want to clarify is section 8D, where it talks about the sizes of the residential units, and it says a designated space for the kitchen, bathroom, etc. I'm not looking at it, I'm just remembering off the top of my head. I would suggest to change that to, instead of a designated space, to designated spaces, plural. so that it is clear. And the reason I'll explain the reason in a moment. So it's clear we're talking about a separate space for a bathroom. Because this came up when we had a zoning proposal for, right along the same lines as that. And the architects on the commission at the time thought it was talking about some kind of an open bathroom, and I was thinking the same thing. Like, what are we talking about? So to make it clear, that's to just say to word that different. That's my suggestion. Maybe you have a different way of wording it. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and I would like to also add, while we're on this section has taken a lot of criticism, both from developers as well as the planning commission in the past, about the size of the individual units, about habitable space. And so this
A
section,
major issue for many years.
so this section attempted to bring this back into some reality. It still is above what the code building code requires, but it's we felt that the existing ordinance may have been a little bit too restrictive on the size as well. I mean, it was more of like a suburban type of standard. This is more of an urban standard.
Right. Right. And we made exceptions for student housing in downtown already.
Yeah.
And so I understand where you're coming from there. I just wanted to clarify that, so there's no question on that. And then there's a list of considerations there, not parking, but like, I can't remember them off the top of my head, just, the lighting and landscape and so forth. And just wanted to throw out that traffic was not listed among them. I don't know if we should include that there or not. I'm just trying to think of all the things that come up that's under our purview, and traffic always often comes up. So I don't know if that should be something that should be included there in the list of considerations.
Yes, it could. I think that's a good point.
Okay, thank you. That's, I think, all I had on that. Does anyone have anything else on that before we go on? I mean, it was very important. Like I say, very good work, very thorough, professional, and but I'm glad that we have the opportunity on the commission with our perspective and expertise to give our contributions to help make it even better. Anyone have anything else? If not, let's go on to the parking one. That's certainly been another big issue. Does any commissioner have anything to suggest or ask about the parking ordinance proposal? It's a very comprehensive, another comprehensive proposal here. There's a lot there, and maybe it's okay. This is only the workshop, so members are still going to continue to look this over and maybe come back with further ideas. But if you have anything now, please feel free. Does anyone have anything to ask or comment on? Okay, if not, I do have a few things. Here's one question for you, and like you said, this is a work in progress. Should we make a provision for motorcycle parking?
No, but that's and then you're talking about also probably compact spaces as well.
Well, I was thinking that too. Yeah, I was, because we have the smart cars now that are like, half the size of.
We did.
Yeah,
that.
I was thinking that. So what do you think, that we should consider that, or for calculations? And I don't know. I don't even know what to say about it. Just wanted to throw it out there.
It can be included, Will, and I think that's appropriate. And we did include that, or attempted to include that provision within the parking garages. So I think that we could also identify that as well within the general provision. So we'll find a spot.
All right. Okay, thank you. I'm glad you mentioned the compact cars, because I was thinking that, but I just thought I'd start with the motorcycles at least. You were trying to identify all the uses, and I think you said there's maybe about 80%. And I thought of one, because this has come up, which is the food trucks. Not so much the spaces that they take up, although maybe that should be part of it, But if they're in a parking lot of some other commercial entity, which I think is usually how this works, what about, do we have to have a calculation for the number of spaces for their customers or something like that? Or should we not worry about this? It's already covered under the food truck provision. I didn't look, so I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there to think about it.
We'll check on that.
Okay. A few months ago, we had a food truck. We have to, believe it or not, we have to, under planning, we have to approve them, and it kind of makes sense with the parking. And it's like, okay, we don't want to overlook that. Again, anytime any commissioner has anything to add or comment, please jump in. The section on the recreational vehicles. I'm going to make a suggestion. That's section 1611, that we consider an exception, that maybe we have a rule about size, because the Class B trailers are often just converted vans or pickup trucks. They're the same size, that they fit in a regular parking space. So I'm not sure if those kinds of vehicles really should be regulated differently from any other kind of vehicle. I'm just going to put that out again for consideration to think about. Certainly, the Class A kind, and then the C. I'm trying to remember if C is the trailer type, right?
Yeah, and like I said,
And
look, we did find this in the city code. The city code currently does cover recreation vehicles, so this section may be eliminated.
Okay. Well, think about if we are going to keep it, clarifying it,
Sure.
because I'm not so sure why we would discourage like I said, the ones that really aren't posing an additional parking problem. In fact, you wouldn't even know from the outside that they are RVs. You can't even tell, you know.
I'm somewhat
They
familiar.
look like a normal van or a small truck, you know. What's that?
I'm somewhat familiar with what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Think about that. I know, like we said, this is a work in progress. So if the whole section gets nixed. I mean, I couldn't tell from reviewing this, like there wasn't any, what the ordinance was, there wasn't any strike through, or I couldn't tell what was old and what's new. Sorry, I wasn't looking back as a reference.
I would say 95% of this is new.
Okay, so it was just worth it to look at it the way it was then. And
Yeah.
then finally, and this just came up with the previous presentation, any consideration about tractor trailer parking? This has come up a few times. Not as much with planning, but it's come up before council, some years ago. But we've heard about it already. But I mean, any thoughts on that subject?
We should probably incorporate that, if it's not there already, into section. Probably 1604.
Okay, good. I mean, yeah, this has come up, like I said, and that's really taken up. You know, I'm talking about 18-wheelers and so forth. I mean, they're taking up a lot of spaces, and they tend to park in areas that are not where there's a lot of park. You know, but not where there's not a lot of people parking. But they take up. You know, the question is this really something we want? I mean, because then we have there's certain areas of the city, and particularly in the Northeast, that we were just talking about it near Albright and near the post office, and that area where there's just a lot of tractor trailers parked there. It's just really, I don't know. There's pros and cons to that, and I'm just throwing it out there for discussion. Like I say, council had considered this. Yeah, at one time I thought there was an ordinance that was proposed that vehicles can only park so many days. There was going to be a limit, and one of the reasons was because of the tractor trailers. Okay. And I know our councilman in that district had brought the issue up. So again, I don't guess there are pros and cons to this. What are the issues from a safety standpoint, from aesthetical standpoint, and so on? Should we require these, to be parked on site, or what? So anyway, I just put it out there for people to weigh in on and think about it, and our colleagues can continue to think about these. I think that's all I had. And again, does anybody have anything else on any of these ordinances? It's really important work that we get to do on this body, besides the land development that we do. Is really, this is where we do more of the planning ourselves, is through these amendment processes. If not, okay, I think that takes us to, I guess, our planner, Brandy, is going to update us briefly on the agenda for the upcoming meeting, regular meeting of the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have it up. I'm sharing the document now, so I'll just go through the plans that we will take a look at. The conditional use application for 400 North 6th Street, that was tabled at last month's meeting, so we'll take another look at that one. We have a new application this month, the Joint Municipal Authority of Wyomissing Valley. That's an annexation plan. There's an updated plan for the Wawa store number 153. This is the Wawa on North 11th Street. And an update for the Goggle Works annexation plan. We did receive some new plans for the Iglesia Pentecostal Church on 1124 Schuylkill Avenue. I don't know if we'll have time to get that review in, but that plan was also tabled at last month's meeting, so we can at least provide an update for that. And then we'll, of course, talk about the 12th Street traffic pattern that we discussed this evening. And then there is, I sent to you all via email, the Muhlenberg-Laureldale Joint Comp Plan. They requested a review from us, and so I can bring that up, and then I can turn that over to Jerome. I don't know if you had any comments about that plan.
Not yet. As you're aware that when a comprehensive plan is done by an adjoining municipality, the adjoining municipality has the opportunity to provide comments, and this is going to be your opportunity. So
Go ahead.
I'll be able to identify if there has been any changes along the perimeter or the boundary that you shared with Muhlenberg and Laureldale with the city of Reading.
Well, thank you. Actually, I did not know that. So it must be the first time that has come up. And when I saw the email from Brandy, I thought it was just an advisory thing I'd look at sometime, and I didn't realize we need to review it to give our recommendation. So I'll be diligent to do my homework on that. So thank you for explaining it. There are a number of parcels that overlap the city and Muhlenberg Township.
Yeah, and just for clarification, Laureldale does not adjoin the city of Reading, but Muhlenberg Township does. And they did a cooperative effort together, so it's going to be a joint comprehensive plan that is. So yeah,
under Pennsylvania municipal law, I believe that municipalities can do joint planning.
Yeah,
and we're still working on updating ours. So we'll get a look at this one with interest. And okay, thank you for explaining that. And on to the next item.
Yeah, so I'm skipping down to item 12. I don't think I'll check to see if we have any plans that are up for reaffirmation, but there is only one time extension that would be required. That's the Holy Trinity Church of God.
Right.
And then just on to the announcements, we'll discuss, just provide a summary for what we discussed this evening about the ordinance amendments for the parking and the adaptive reuse.
Yes. Does anyone have any questions or comments or anything to add for the agenda? If not, I think we're all set. I think this is very, very enlightening and productive workshop. We thank the staff and our consultant and all the presenters. And interpreting this as a committee as a whole, we don't actually need to adjourn. I think what we just do is we ride. Actually, it's the term, believe it or not. And so we will meet next week, Tuesday, July 25th at 6 p.m. Where is the meeting room for next week's regular meeting of the Planning Commission?
Next week, we will be in the Penn Room. I reserved
In the Penn Room.
So, yeah, I will send out that notice to everyone. That's
And as usual, it'll be a hybrid meeting like this one as well.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. So we will then convene at our regular meeting next Tuesday. Thank you all and have a good night.
Thank
All
you.
right, good night. Nicely done, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, good night, everybody.